All right, let's jump into today's program. Over the weekend, we observed a very somber anniversary. I don't know how else to say it. It was 2 years ago on Saturday that 13 service members were killed in Afghanistan during the Biden administration's chaotic withdrawal from that country. And on Friday last week, articles of impeachment against the defense secretary were introduced over his role in that botched withdrawal. So that adds to just a growing list of administration officials that Republicans are looking into for alleged wrongdoings. Well, the big question for the country is, are we going to see some accountability from all of this? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Keith Self. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee as well as the Veterans Affairs Committee. He also gratefully served our country for 25 years in uniform before retiring with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He represents the 3rd Congressional District of Texas. Congressman Self, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you.
Thank you, Jody. Good to be here.
Well, let's jump into the weekend and the anniversary of 2 years following the attack of Abbey Gate there in Afghanistan. Give me some of your reflections.
Well, the Biden administration has never been held accountable, has never admitted any responsibility whatsoever. You called it chaotic. I would call it a strategic blunder of the highest order. That was a blunder that immediately people around the world started taking note of. Putin started moving troops toward Ukraine within weeks of that disastrous withdrawal. It was basically a surrender to the Taliban, and 13 service members paid with their lives.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, chaotic is what I said, but listen, thanks for catching that. That is just hitting the tip of the iceberg. You indeed are correct. That is when the entire world took notice that the United States has weak leadership, and Putin took advantage of it and so forth. But the Gold Star families here, Congressman, they've accused the Biden administration through all of this of covering up evidence that the Abbey Gate bombing was preventable. And there have been multiple other reports of ways that this administration has not been transparent. These families deserve better than what they're getting. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, because I can think of 2 ways that this attack was preventable, to use your word. First of all, we now know that the bomber was released from jail just a couple of weeks before the bombing when the Taliban took control of the jail. One of the first things that happened was that Taliban released people out of the jail, and then we paid with it for 13 lives of our servicemen. The second is that we know, we've heard testimony in the Foreign Affairs Committee that a sniper had the bomber in his sights, identified, everyone knew what he looked like. We had evidence of what he would look like. We had him in our sights, and the commander told the sniper, "I don't know who has authority to make that, to pull the trigger." That is unconscionable, which means that they didn't understand their rules of engagement. And again, because the chain of command was uncertain, didn't have absolutely tight rules of engagement, 13 service members lost their lives. That's 2 ways that this bombing was preventable.
Wow. I was not aware of that last one. That's stunning. Well, listen, you mentioned the Foreign Affairs Committee, and it's my understanding tomorrow the Foreign Affairs Committee is going to have a roundtable discussion with some of the family members who lost their loved ones, a family of these U.S. service members who were killed in the attack. What are you hoping is going to come out of that roundtable?
Well, Mike Waltz, the other Green Beret in Congress, has dealt with loss of service members throughout his career, and he's the one that's leading this effort. And I hope that we hear from them exactly what they would like to know from the administration, because when a service member dies, our country used to provide them, to bend over backwards to provide them everything they needed: support, information, certainly to return their worldly goods. And I understand from Mike that they've returned their phones without the SIM cards, which means the families don't even have the last remembrances, the last photographs. Why is that? Why would you take the SIM card out of a phone from a service member that's died?
I've never heard of such. That's a great question. Congressman Keith Self joining me right now. If I can switch gears with you, there's so many different things to cover, but House Speaker Kevin McCarthy highlighted yesterday how the GOP is finding more and more and more revealing evidence of President Biden every week. What's your take on the latest of what's emerging in all of the findings?
Oh, my goodness, there's so much to cover. Excuse me, there's so much to cover. I mean, my goodness, 20 shell companies, 16 payments from Romania while he was vice president, a new car and $3.5 million following a phone call. I mean, we now know that 9 members were taking money, and I've heard through the committee that it may be as many as 12. I mean, the evidence is just overwhelming. The speaker is exactly right. It is now time to move to the next level, and that's an impeachment inquiry. And frankly, I expect that to happen soon after we get back in session on 12 September.
So do you see the impeachment inquiry at this point into President Biden as something that, can we say, is inevitable?
I would use that word, yes. I believe so. Because even since we've been on August recess, the committee has continued to work and has found more. So, I mean, it is growing by the day. And I believe that that's what we'll see, an impeachment inquiry soon after we get back.
You know, and it's not just President Biden here. I mean, and with this, I mean, those of us out here, we look at the GOP right now and say, thank you for doing your job. But in the process of doing your job, of course, there's a lot of criticism coming from the left that the GOP has a growing list of administration officials that are just simply targets of the GOP for impeachment inquiries. Give me your response to all of that criticism.
Well, we've talked about President Biden, but we've talked before President Biden about Mayorkas because of the border, absolute dereliction of duty on the border. We've talked about Garland, Attorney General Garland, because he's the one that's actually covering up for Hunter Biden and the president. So I'm not sure which of the targets, as you call them, the impeachment inquiry will actually target. But there is, as we call in the military, a target-rich environment.
Yeah, not to mention Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. I mean, it's like you've got a whole deck of cards, and it's an eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Where do you start at this point? Listen, with our little time remaining, I want to get your thoughts on the latest regarding the Georgia indictment against President Trump and 18 others. What do you make of all of that?
Well, to borrow a phrase from history, this is the mug shot heard round the world. This has backfired big time. They've raised over $7 million since Thursday. It has now become a rallying cry. I don't know if the Georgia folks really want to support President Trump in his second election, but certainly looks like they're going to. Again, a mugshot heard round the world.
That is a great word picture. I actually have not heard that yet, and while you were saying it, I found myself chuckling here because indeed it is the mugshot seen and heard around the world. Congressman Keith Self from Texas, always great to see you. Thank you for joining us on Washington Watch.
Thank you so much, Jody.